Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Puccini's Turandot with conductor Yannick Nezet-Seguin, which was live from the Metropolitan Opera House and which I saw at the Kino in der Kulturbrauerei. This marks the third overall time I saw this particular production of Puccini's Turandot, directed by the late, great Franco Zeffirelli, because I not only wanted to witness Christine Goerke singing the title role, which she has also done 4 years ago at the Met, but also Eleonora Buratto, who sang the role of Liu. First, I'll start off with Christine Goerke as Turandot. I definitely enjoyed her overall performance in this really challenging Mount Everest of a role. I also enjoyed that full, rich, and voluminous quality that she had to her voice and her absolutely charismatic stage presence, and I thought that she managed to pull off this role rather well. However, there were issues that I had with her singing, such as her frequent tongue vibrations, as well as some flat high notes, and even some hesitant chest tones. As rich and gorgeously toned Christine Goerke's voice is, it could be a whole lot more dramatic, a whole lot fuller, and just a whole lot more exciting if she could eliminate those excessive tongue vibrations and take more advantage of those chest tones. Sure, she did manage to use chest tones in the places she felt appropriate, but I'm talking about embracing all the chest tones as well as really digging into that chest voice in order to make it bloom much more, because that is where the whole meat is and that is where the excitement starts. And granted, her instrument may not have the blazing and absolutely well-rounded quality of Gertrud Grob-Brandl or even that of Birgit Nilsson combined, or even that of the smoky and really steely timbre of Rossi-Deli, or even that signature richness and fullness and absolute mastery of the chest voice found in the great Gena Dimitrova, but I could still give Christine Goerke some credit for what she was able to pull off. It was not an easy job for her to sing Turandot, let alone all the other dramatic soprano roles that she has been specializing in, such as Elektra and Brunhilde. But what she managed to do with this role was pretty laudable, considering how much she was able to inject her signature charisma and her determination and the dedication that she has to her craft to make Turandot come alive. So here's hoping that Christine Goerke will continue to work more on her chest tones, really embrace the chest voice so that it can keep blooming and blooming and blooming into the dramatic soprano repertoire that she is specializing in these days. And here's also hoping that she will keep on developing as a fine dramatic singer, because we rarely have true dramatic voices in this day and age. When it was announced that Yusif Eyvazov was going to sing the role of Calaf instead of Roberto Aronica, I was not looking forward to this particular tenor, because as I heard him on YouTube, I was not completely convinced that this was a spinto tenor. His voice sounded nasal, it sounded rather small, and it had that tremolo and caprino voice that I cannot stand. And those said sentiments were also rather evident when I heard him sing the role of Calaf. Sure, there were some parts in which he did show some amount of vivacity, and there were times that he did sing well, and I thought that some of his high notes were rather exciting to listen to, but the overall execution of his voice left a lot to be desired. Simply put, I have heard a lot more exciting and much bigger singing from the likes of Francesco Merli, Hans Hopf, Mario del Monaco, Franco Corelli, Ludovic Spies, and many other great dramatic tenors of the past. When comparing them to Yusif Eyvazov, he completely pales in comparison because there is something missing in his voice. It's missing the extra body, it's missing that extra bite and intensity, and it is missing in a sufficient amount of chest voice, as evidenced when he sang the lower notes. But even in spite of all that, I still have to give Mr. Eyvazov some credit for at least tackling this particular role, which is not an easy job, but hey, at least he managed to brave all the odds and take on this role head on. What I would love to expect from him is so much more development from his voice. That means he needs to develop his core a lot more, he needs to develop his chest tones a lot more, and even improve his technique if he is to keep on singing the spinto tenor roles that he is specializing in these days. The good news, however, was seeing Eleonora Buratto as Liu. This is a soprano who has built up her career rather well. From the light lyric soprano roles of Musetta, Susana, and Corina, and even Echo from Ariadne auf Naxos, to singing more full lyric soprano roles such as the Countess from Le Nozze di Figaro, Mimi from La Boheme, and even Luisa Miller by Verdi. I was at first skeptical given the repertoire that she specialized in and given the fact that I was not so sure how she was going to pull off Liu. Because if you know me, I prefer a much more full-bodied sounding voice singing Liu. Voices that come into my mind are the likes of Renata Tebaldi and Marcella Pobe. Both of them being my most favorite Lius who have managed to use their fine spinto soprano voices to bring this particular slave girl to life in all of her strength and in all of her beauty. As I went into Eleonora Buratto's performance as Liu, I kept an open mind, and what I managed to get from Miss Buratto was absolutely fine musicianship. Was her voice as rich or full-bodied as, let's say, Renata Tebaldi, Montserrat Caballé, Marcella Pobe, Leila Gencher, or many other spinto sopranos or full lyric sopranos who sang Liu? Yes and no. Yes, because she did have sufficient richness when she went into her chest voice singing Signora Ascolta, and no, because I did find the voice a bit light for singing this particular role. However, in spite of all that, I could definitely forgive what type of nitpicks I had with Miss Buratto as Liu, because she was an absolutely fine performer. She stood her ground, gave it her all, and she managed to sell it as this particular slave girl. She had me on the edge of my seat, and she had me hooked with everything she had to offer as Liu, that I had to give her a huge amount of kudos for everything she accomplished as this particular slave girl. James Morris managed to continue to use his tall and very strong stage presence to bring Timur to life. I first heard James Morris when I was 10 years old, and he performed the role of the Docteur Miracle from a CD version of Offenbach's Le Comte Hoffmann, alongside Placido Domingo as Hoffmann, Claudia Eda as Neklaus, and Edita Gruberova as all three heroines. My first impression of Mr. Morris as a singer was he managed to use that snarling and virile timbre in his voice to bring all of these villainous characters to life. Characters like Claggart from Billy Budd, and especially Wotan, who is more of an ambiguous character from Das Rheingold, Die Walküre, and Siegfried, were definitely his major calling cards. However, he also specialized in the basso cantante parts of Colline from Bohème, Banco from Macbeth, and King Philip II from Don Carlo, unless I forget about his rendition of Don Giovanni, which he sang back in the 70s all the way up to the 90s, and even a few years ago, he even sang the Commendatore. As much as I enjoyed his stage presence, and as much as I enjoyed his performance as Timur, thus embodying this character with a lot of strength and a lot of empathy, I noticed that his voice was past its prime, given the fact that he is in his 70s. And of course, it was basically wobbles galore every time he opened his mouth. Sure, he did give a strong performance, but his voice did sound like it went through some wear and tear. However, I could forgive all that because James Morris managed to give quite the laudable performance, and he managed to really stand his ground as the old king. Theatrically, he was in absolutely fine shape given how much he was able to embody the old king with everything he got, and the results managed to be absolutely fine all the way through. Yes, we could have had the likes of Riccardo Zanellato, Mika Karas, Morris Robinson, Eric Owens, and even that of Franz Josef Selig, Solomon Howard, and many other of today's basso cantantes or basso profondos embodying Timur. Heck, we could have even had Alba Pesendorfer for all I care. But in spite of all that, James Morris managed to be as strong as he was as a singing actor, even though his voice did show a lot of wear and tear. Carlo Bossi was a surprisingly strong Emperor Altoum, and yes, this gentleman has been a lot more well known in singing a lot of character tenor parts, but as I managed to hear him sing this role, I was pretty floored. This was a gentleman who still had the goods with his voice and who still managed to navigate this role with such dignity, strength, and a lot of courage that I was practically on cloud 9 when I heard his voice. He managed to do a very fine job embodying Altoum that I have to give him a huge round of kudos for everything that he accomplished as this old emperor. Alexei Lavrov as Ping, Tony Stevenson as Pang, and Eduardo Valdez as Pong managed to be a solid trio. Sure, Alexei Lavrov does need to develop his baritone voice a lot more, and that means singing more in the chest tones and also inhibiting the nasality that is going on with his voice so that his voice could sound a lot richer. And I do hope that he does overcome those issues because this is a baritone with much potential that needs to be sharpened and at its peak performance level. And of course, let's not forget about the fine character tenor singing with Tony Stevenson and Eduardo Valdez, as all three managed to use their interpersonal chemistry to bring these characters to life. Javier Arre did have some constriction as the Mandarin in terms of how he let his voice out, but I'm sure that if he manages to use his chest voice a lot more, if he manages to keep developing those chest tones and make everything rich, full, and round, I'm definitely sure that he will rise above as a fine baritone. And let's not forget about the fine singing accomplished by Maria D'Amato and Meredith Woodend as the handmaidens, as they were able to use their voices rather well for these two small parts. So overall, the singing may have been hit and miss, but if there was one singer who stood out among the crowd, it had to be Eleonora Buratto, who gave a fine performance as Liu. I could still give credit to Christine Goerke for being a strong performer and for holding her own as Turandot, but those vocal inhibitions better go away if she is to keep singing the dramatic soprano repertoire that she nowadays specializes in. Nevertheless, I still have to give credit to these two ladies as they were pretty much the standouts with Eleonora Buratto leading the helm and Christine Goerke trailing behind. And the conducting done by Nezet-Seguin was okay for the most part. There were areas in which it sounded sluggish and that could have used a little bit more oomph, especially in the opening act, but it did get better in the later parts of the opera. And of course, what more can you expect from the orchestra and the chorus of the Metropolitan Opera House? They were pros and they knew how to work it with everything they got. So overall, with mediocre singing by Yusif, Eyvazov, yet nonetheless really fine singing from Eleonora Buratto, and singing that still continues to show some potential done by Christine Goerke, tonight's performance of Puccini's Turandot live from the Metropolitan Opera House was a pretty mixed bag. I'm just hoping that these singers would grow a lot more, especially Christine Goerke and Eleonora Buratto, as they were the ones that managed to shine above the rest. And let's just say that Christine Goerke managed to make Yusif Eyvazov look like quite a midget. And for those of you who saw this particular performance of Puccini's Turandot live from the Metropolitan Opera House, what'd you think of it? Did you think that Christine Goerke stole the show as Turandot? Did you believe that her rival Liu, played by Eleonora Buratto, stole the show from Miss Goerke's thunder? Or did you feel like the singing was not to your liking? Comment below and let me know. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in next time for another review. So until then, good night everybody.